Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Isabel Oswell, and I am Head of Business Audiences at the British Library, and I'm responsible for our business support services in London and across the UK. And I just want to say, there's more going on in libraries than you think. So, welcome to the Changing Face of Fashion. This is the headline event to our National Startup Day, which is taking place in all 22 major city libraries around the country, and also in many of our BIPC locals. And the day was, or this event has been designed to support and inspire creative entrepreneurs in these very challenging times. So we've just got over the pandemic, and now we've got a cost of living crisis. But I've spent some time with these creative fashion designers and entrepreneurs in the green room just now, and I know you're going to get some amazing advice and tips, and you're going to come out of here really inspired. So I just wanted to welcome everybody here in the room, and also all of those who are joining us online. I think there's about 500 of you out there at the moment. I wish I could see you all. And then those of you who are joining us from screenings around the country. So I wanted you all to join me and give a big shout out for, first of all, Glasgow. Can we have a big shout out? Hey! Welcome, Glasgow. And second, we have Leeds. Hooray! Big shout out for Leeds. Hooray! And next in line we have Liverpool. Hooray! Welcome, Liverpool. And last, but by no means least, we have Newcastle. Big shout out for Newcastle. Welcome, everybody, welcome. And if you want to join in tonight, if you want to participate in our conversation on Twitter and also pose questions to the panel, then our hashtag is Inspiring Entrepreneurs. I hope that's right, Jacqueline. Is that right? Yeah, fantastic. Okay, so as you may be, well, as I've already pointed out, we are holding a startup day in all 22 of our partners across the country. And in fact, they've all put together an action-packed day of inspirational events. And today at the British Library has been crazy, and I'm sure it has elsewhere throughout the country. And for those of you who haven't used our services before, both in London and around the country, every day is a startup day in the British Library. Literally, you can just walk in and use our services, or you can book to attend an event, a one-on-one session, or use or access our resources by booking online. And at the heart of our service, for those of you who haven't been here before, are the amazing collections of business information. So we have millions, well, about £5 million worth of market research reports. You'll all have heard of Mintel, you probably know Frost & Sullivan, as well as up-to-the-minute company and financial information. And we also have a database on how to find grants, which I'm sure will interest you all. And that information is normally out of reach to a small business or an aspiring entrepreneur, but it's free in the British Library and across our national network. And we're also experts in intellectual property. So we can tell you all about intellectual property, how it applies to you and your business, and it's particularly relevant in the creative industry. So you've probably all watched Dragon's Den. It's on tomorrow night. And you'll have heard some of those poor entrepreneurs being grilled. What's the size of your market? Who are your major competitors? What are the trend? Do you hold the intellectual property, own the intellectual property for your product or your service? So just don't get into that position. And we also run workshops and one-on-one sessions day in, day out on all aspects of how to start up run and grow your business. And I just wanted to say that we've done quite a lot of impact studies, and we've proven that if you use our services to start up your business, you're going to be more than twice as successful as the normal entrepreneur. So, or I don't know what you call a normal entrepreneur, but let's say the average UK entrepreneur. So, unfortunately, after the third year of trading, around about 50% of businesses fail and fall off a cliff. But after the third year of trading, when you start up with us, over 90% of our businesses are still trading. So I just wanted to leave you with that thought for those of you who haven't been here before. So, just one more thing. You'll all find on your seats here in the room and also around the country in Glasgow, Leeds, Liverpool, Newcastle, and online, there will be a feedback form. This feedback form is absolutely crucial to maintain our funding. And also, you can sign up to our e-newsletter so that if you enjoy this event, and I'm sure you will, then you can find out what's coming next. So, I hope you all have an amazing evening. We've got, as I say, some really inspiring entrepreneurs here. And now I'm going to hand over to the one and only Jacqueline Brown. She's the Business Support Programming Manager here at the British Library. And she's also a fashion entrepreneur in her own right, as you can see by what she's wearing this evening. So, big round of applause for Jacqueline, who's going to be your MC.
Thank you, Isabel. Good evening, everybody. Wow, the view from here is amazing. Even though I'm short-sighted, it still looks great. So welcome once more. And just a quick one as well, just to add on to what Isabel was saying. You should have had these very small kind of slips on your chairs. We are doing digital drop-ins, so think of it's like a mentoring session for to support you. They're free. It's going to happen end of March. If it's something that you'd like to take part in, it will be online, so don't worry about coming in on those days. Then do fill it out and hand it in with your feedback forms, okay? So that's that. Now, let's get the party started. I'm so excited. Got some great speakers. But before I do that, before I invite them up one by one, I just wanted to just let you know what's going to happen today or tonight is we're going to have a panel of 5 amazing speakers. We're going to have a bit of time with them, Q&A, fun conversation. Then we're going to open for question time with the speakers. Then we will ask them to return back to their chairs here. And then I'll invite up our guest speaker, Patrick Grant, for our fireside chat. And then we will have, you'll have a chance to ask him some questions as well at the end. That will be followed by drinks and nibbles. For those who are here just for the drinks or the nibbles, that will happen around 8 o'clock-ish. So we'll say bye then to our guests online. Sorry you can't have the drinks and nibbles, but we'll say bye to them online, and then we'll open up for that networking time. And then we will close. Everybody will be able to leave around 9 o'clock, well, between 8 and 9, whenever you'd like to leave. By 9 o'clock, the library will be closed off. Okay, so as we start, I did want to just recognize it is fashion season, it is fashion month, fashion weeks, very busy time on the calendar. And recently there has been some quite big names who have recently passed. And so I thought, let me just mention those, such as Vivienne Westwood, you see I'm wearing today. Hilary Alexander, who I had a chance to meet, who was such, an important person in, especially for Graduate Fashion Week and just the industry in general. She was amazing. Paco Rabanne, Andre Leon Talley, I know he's not British, but doesn't matter. Thierry Mugler, Hannah Mori, and Izzy Miyake. So let's just, just remember them for being, key parts of this industry that we all love. Well, I hope we all love it. But yeah, just wanted to recognize them. So, with that in mind, who's ready for our speakers? Oh, wow, look at that, guys. Yeah, come on, make them feel nice. Make them feel nice. Awesome, awesome. So I'll call them up one by one, and then we will jump in. So, Priscilla Okpan. As you make your way, I might have to help her with her beautiful shoes. But she's a Nigerian fashion designer. She's a digital content creator, YouTuber, and she has her own fashion brand, Kim Dave. She is extremely busy. So go to the second seat. Let me come this way. She's extremely busy on Instagram, TikTok, and all these channels, YouTube, one of the YouTube creators. And she actually started with a degree in microbiology. I mean, come on. Very, very intelligent lady and also very creative lady. So she's got thousands of subscribers. She uses her brand, Kim Dave. It's a women's wear label. She launched in 2019, so just before the pandemic, to celebrate her Nigerian roots. So let's just celebrate Priscilla. Welcome. Then Ursula De Castro, amazing lady who's been really a key part of the ethical fashion or sustainable fashion movement. She's a mentor, curator, and author, and she has won awards for her brand From Somewhere, which she had in 1997 to 2014, pioneering in upcycling. She sold in some of the world's top boutiques. She started Aesthetica. I can't get the words in. I do have a lisp, and so forgive me. And the highly acclaimed Sustainable Fashion Showcase at London Fashion Week. She's a contributor at Central St. Martin's, a fellow, visiting professor at Middlesex University. And her recent book, if you haven't got it, get her book, Loved Clothes Last, was published in 2021. Oh, you got her book? Awesome. There's her book there. But yeah, she is a pioneer and she is a powerhouse in that field. So welcome, Ursula. Next up, I'd like to bring Laura. Now, this one. Nikolaeva. Yeah, you'll have to tell me how it says. Well, Laura Jean is her brand. Born and raised in Bulgaria, Southeast Europe. She's got 2 degrees, advertising and business studies. And she entered fashion when she started modeling to support her studies. I mean, if we could all do that, great, right? I mean, she can, she really can. She had a makeup and hair agency in Eastern Europe, and her clothing brand, Laura Jean, as mentioned, is recognized as one of the best sustainable ethical brands in the UK. She's been in Vogue, Stylist, Guardian, so much more. And just really glad to have her here. And she's a lead for Sustainable Mentorship Program at Oxford University. So welcome, Laura. Welcome, welcome. Okay, here's where it gets a little bit confusing. We've got 2 Patricks tonight. But the first Patrick we're bringing up is Patrick McDowell. So he's an independent, sustainable luxury brand, was founded by the designer of the same name in 2018. He went to Central St. Martin's. Any Central St. Martin's people here? Oh, there's a couple, a few. And he strived to reinvent the role of a fashion designer as we know it today. He showcased at London Fashion Week. He's captivated the industry whilst gaining the recognition of titans who share his vision for redesigning and creating an accessible circular solution and system. And recently did a fashion tech show as well. We should talk about that. Okay, welcome Patrick. Patrick M. And last but not least, Justin Duffy, welcome to the stage. He's worked in product design for 10 years. He's worked for Next, River Island, Puma, Money Clothing, Rohan. It goes on. And then he transitioned into consultancy role at BDA, which is a trend company. He was a senior menswear project manager. He's now at WGSN. And for 8 years, he's played a role in setting and delivering product, brand, and retail strategies. And he's worked with TFG Group in that account in South Africa. So Justin works closely with macro-level trends and shifts across global markets. So he just recently joined the Mindset team at WGSN as a senior consultant. Who's ever used WGSN? Look at that. There you go, Justin. So that's where he continues to explore new growth opportunities across fashion and lifestyle categories. Oh my gosh, let me not spill my water. What an amazing group of people. Okay, let's dive in. Let's dive in. Okay. So first question to Patrick M. So your brand is relatively new in the world of fashion, I guess. And what are some of the realities of starting a fashion brand in today's very changing market? Give the people some realities. Don't make it all sweetie darling. Tell them the truth. What is it like?
It's such a big question. It's first of all, it's amazing, right? Like the ability to run a business based on your own creativity is such a privilege, and I do feel very lucky every day to do it. Not all day, every day. Also, being a queer, working class northern person, people from where I'm from don't do this. They don't go to St. Martin's, they don't start businesses, and they don't do creative things on the whole. So, you know, wasn't necessarily a path that I thought was possible, but it has happened, which is kind of amazing. I think it's challenging because, you know, the reality is we've gone through many difficult things over the past few years, like all businesses. But fashion is kind of special because it sits on a tightrope between business and creativity, right? Unlike most creative things, which you don't have to put on your body. And so it performs a bit of a different function because it becomes part of who you are, and that's different to art because you look at that rather than wear that. So I think it's, you know, for me, and sustainability in fashion just made sense. It was like I was working in a big fashion house, and it didn't make sense to me to have all of this waste. And so I thought that I should be doing something differently, and it wasn't necessarily somebody doing what I wanted to do, so I did it myself. But you know, challenges, I think like many businesses, it's like funding and finding the space are always hard at the beginning. But I think if you've got a point of view and you're making something that people are interested in, something that tells a story, I found that always resonates with people and is working out. So
Amazing. So yeah, the funding is a major one, especially for fashion. I don't think people really, when they go into it, don't understand the money you need to have ready before you even start. So that one, again, use our services to learn, get some support and understanding on financial literacy. So thank you. But Laura, in a similar situation in the recent years, because your brand is also relatively new, within the last 5 years, I guess. With the cost of living crisis now upon us, I know we all hate that term now, don't we? But it is upon us. It is impacting brands. We're seeing loads of shops close down and so forth. And it impacts supply chains, it impacts sales and growth. So how is your brand helping your consumers? So firstly, how is that situation, the cost of living crisis, impacting your brand as we're seeing happening around the world?
You know what, if I have to be completely honest, I don't think we still know. Like, we don't know what's going to happen, really. But I'm a firm believer that if you create a valuable product that serves people, and I know it sounds quite general, but serves and it has a value, there is no way you're not going to pull through. There is no way you're not going to make it. You know, it might be harder. It might be, we are a direct customer brand, and this is really hard, especially online, especially not having a door. You know, it's a very saturated business environment in general, especially in fashion, like Patrick said. But I do feel like if you have something to say, to create, to tell a story with your product and make it valuable enough, you will always find your customers and you will always bring value to them. This is how I function as a creator, I guess.
Being a sustainable brand then, how are you translating that to your consumers?
You know what? I have a bit of a problem with the term sustainable in general.
I
I
knew that
feel
would
like a lot
happen.
of people, I'm sorry.
No,
I
that's
just feel
fine.
like a lot of people get confused what sustainability means because we talk about the environment on one side. We rarely talk about the workers on the other side. And because I come from a nation of tailors, you know, we have over 1,200 factories right now, I think. For a country of 6 million people, that's a lot, you know, it's half the country. So I just feel like people get confused. I would rather say responsible. So we have to make this a norm, you know. I don't think I ever think, oh, I'm going to create that and make it sustainable. I don't.
It's just how you do it.
It's just how you do it, you know. Like he said, if you see the waste that's happening in a big corporation, you sort of like try and do it the other way. Every waste can be out-designed, if that makes sense. We can design it out, you know. It's a design flaw, it's not a product flaw.
Totally. I mean, it was, for those who don't know, I did an ethical fashion master's, and it was something that I was looking for, but it didn't exist at the time, but it came at the right time. It came at the right time. And I was working in the fashion industry, and I was able to go to a lot of factories abroad and see how things were being done. But always thinking, something's just not right. Something's not right. And then I did this ethical fashion masters, and I decided that, you know, that kicked off my journey where I met people like Ursula, and I started to learn a bit more about it. Because back in the day, it was all about eco-fashion, or it was all about hemp clothing and all that kind of stuff. So it's evolved. It really has evolved in name as well. So, I mean, in light of that, because one of the major incidences within the fashion industry that I don't see how many people know about the Rana Plaza factory collapse. Raise your hands. Okay. So because of that and the collapse in 2013, it prompted a rise in ethical fashion or sustainable fashion, became circular fashion. It's all about transparency and so forth. So I want to ask Ursula, who has been quite a big role in that through Fashion Revolution and so forth, which stemmed out of that time. Why do you feel that there is a bigger need now for a call for transparency since the pandemic? Because we understand since the Rana Plaza factory collapse, but since the pandemic.
There's no sense. We just need to know who make our clothes. We need to know where the resources of those clothes come from. We need to know that the people who make our clothes are making those clothes in safe and fair conditions. I mean, the skin is the second most absorbing organ in our body. I don't understand how we can make a distinction between an organic tomato not having preservatives and chemicals, and yet we're wearing clothes that are made by people who are fearing for their lives. So when Rana Plaza happened, for me, what was really shocking was the fact that those garment professionals had noticed that the building was unsafe, had requested to go home, they'd been sent home and then brought back to work. So they were working as the building was unsafe. Those clothes were delivered out of the factories and people bought them. So we really are, for me, wearing clothes that are made not in dignity. So, and when we started Fashion Revolution, we thought we just need to make this lack of transparency transparent. So we thought, what's the dumbest questions that we can ask that no brand can ever possibly reply to? No mainstream brand, and that was, who made my clothes? True enough, they didn't have a clue. 10 years later, still not enough has been done because the fashion industry still remains
10 years
unregulated.
Now, of course,
yeah, it is 10 years. It's 10 years in April.
In April.
So an industry that remains unregulated, an industry that does not allow itself to be scrutinized, is an industry that has a lot to hide. There's a fantastic designer in India at the moment, a designer and producer called Oshadi, who works with regenerative fashion, who just today sent a quote saying, you know, if the fashion industry was a government, what would we do about the racism, the exploitation, the lack of sustainability, the lack
We'd
of
be screwed.
lawfulness? Precisely, we'd be screwed. But I'm wondering whether we wouldn't have, reacted with more of of action. How spoiled are we that we can pick clothes almost from trees and wear them without any responsibility to find out who makes them, and above all, with no responsibility as to what we do with them after we have owned them. So our responsibility towards clothing is 360 degrees, from the second those resources are used via the people who make them and then on to us. And I'm just briefly going to pick on what you were saying, because you mentioned about direct to consumer, and we thought that online was going to bring a huge democratization for smaller brands, brands such as Patrick and Laura, and many of the other brands all over the world that I have the fortune and privilege to mentor. That's not been the case. Actually, we keep buying those same brands whom we know that they are effectively creating harm and damage rather than just wonderful clothing. So it's very much our responsibility to do a bit of a clothes check, a love check. What are you wearing and why? At the end of the day, the wonderful thing about clothing is that it does affect 100% of the population. So every day, you're not going to leave your house naked. So you've got a choice. Make that a choice that supports people and nature.
Who last? Raise your hand if you've checked the label of your clothing
you were gonna say, right?
this year, of anything that you bought. So you look at the fabric content, where it's made. It's
But
a
we
few,
need the information of how much people are paid and what that at the point of purchase.
Yeah, that's what I
You
meant
know,
by
that we-
Even more,
responsible.
yeah.
You know, you're buying a pair of
Fun,
jeans,
you know?
the size of how it fits you, it has to fit your principles as well. And that's
Absolutely.
directly proportionate to how the workers are treated. Sorry.
Absolutely.
No.
Thank you. Yes, absolutely. She's right. Totally. Totally. I mean, just to tag on to that, because one of the things that came up, especially during the pandemic, I mean, if we were sitting here probably this time last year, we'd all be in masks. I don't know if there's anybody who wears masks. I do at times still. But we'd all be sitting in masks. And that is one of what the pandemic has delivered. One of the deliveries of the pandemic is the production of these masks, these throwaway items. And there's been a lot of talk around that, about the waste that's just from the pandemic. I mean, have you, either of you or anybody here, got any thoughts around that? About the impact of the pandemic on the fashion industry?
Of course, the
Go
supply
for it.
chain is broken. Sorry.
Go for it. Why is it broken?
No, well, listen, when you are entirely dependent, as someone, and I'm pretty sure Patrick has things to say as well, it's becoming harder because we are entirely dependent on the Far East for fiber production. We don't do fibers in Europe. We do a very tiny bit of percentage. We finish them, but like if you look at, I personally work with silk a lot because of many reasons, but I'm not going to go into that. I was in a trade show for yarns 2 weeks ago and having a chat with one of the biggest mills for silk fibers. There are only two companies in Europe who are finishing silk, only two. The demand is growing because people are more conscious about natural fibers and how much they're valuable, way more valuable than artificial fibers. But we don't have enough capacities. We are struggling. If we are dependent on fiber production in the Far East, and the Far East is closed for 2 years, what's going to happen is a huge backlog of demand, which we can't cope with. So now, currently, we're facing, instead of, let's say, 4 to 6 weeks of delivery of something, whatever, now we're facing 8, 12 weeks. And that's the best case scenario. We don't have zippers, we don't have buttons. I mean, obviously, for us, probably in terms of size as a business, it's easier to get your hands into things, but the whole supply chain is struggling for years now. not to mention the transparency. So it started with COVID. Now, obviously, the living crisis and wages are going up. The inflation is hitting everything. Linen prices, for instance, went mental. You know, all of these are challenges, which I think the most important thing is probably how do we communicate those challenges to our audiences? Because I personally feel like if you're honest and open enough to tell your customer base, however big it is, listen, we have no choice, and they value your product enough, I do believe that you are, okay, maybe not on the safe side, but you can pull through.
Very true, very true. So it is about
But I'm
communication.
usually more positive.
Yeah, no, well, it's a reality. This is a reality, and I think it's sharing this side of the industry rather than, you know, the catwalks, which we're going to get to, Justin, on the trends. Just one moment around that. But I want to jump on another side of that, which Priscilla has tapped into, either by chance or by choice. We can talk about that with your sewing. You know, making your own clothes, making, you know, things that you want to wear yourself rather than having to always go out and purchase. So that you know it's going to fit, you will last. Loved clothes last. You know, home sewed clothes last. Hopefully, if it's made right. So you've been able to utilize this sewing craft, and you've amassed an online community of around 4,000 subscribers, 22 million views on YouTube alone. So maybe tell us a little bit about how you got into this sewing fashion instead, and how another business here could maybe tap into the power of crafts, home sewing, etc., to develop a strong brand.
My journey into fashion was intentional. So I came into the UK in 2015 to study fashion design, and that's when I started my YouTube channel. I was just doing hauls, doing makeup, doing anything and everything I was interested in.
Now it gets real, okay.
Like hair, random stuff, but I narrowed it down over the years, and I just focused on creating, you know, pattern tutorials, finding the right fabrics to make those patterns, fixing common fit issues on garments, and recently, like, the journey of starting my own ready-to-wear brand, Kim Dave. And it's been tough, but I document everything. So I actually went to Nigeria in December and visited the factory where my pieces are made, spoke with the ladies there, made sure everybody was like working in good conditions. Like Rufiat made a dress, like I know her name, I know like what her story is like. And
who made your clothes, right?
yeah, that's really important. So from that trip and from sharing that journey, like being transparent on my channel, people know the process and who made the clothes as well. I actually think it adds a certain level of value to my products. I don't know if it will work for every business, but I would say being transparent with the production process, who makes your clothes, where they're made, the fabrics you use. I did a pop-up recently, and I kid you not, every customer that came to my reel was like, what fiber is in this top? Where was it made? Like,
so they're curious.
They're actually
because it was
quite curious.
different, or
Yeah,
just
I think
curious?
I think it's because it was different, and people are becoming more aware of how and what they're consuming. So being transparent is one. Second is the internet is like a sea of information. There's so much free stuff on there if you want to learn about marketing, if you want to learn about where to find the right labels for your clothes, if you want to learn how to make a top and you want to launch that in your brand, there's so much information on
Go to
YouTube.
Kim Dave on YouTube.
Yes, come to my channel. There's so much free information on there that you could possibly use and fine-tune for whatever needs that your business might have. The third would be collaborate with other creators you find online. You might not know how to do everything yourself. Like, I'm not very patient. I'm not very good with money. I'm not very good with numbers. So I am going to search on the internet, go on LinkedIn, and find someone who would fulfill that need for my business. And I think that's something that social media does really well for us.
Absolutely. I mean, I myself was able to start a sewing subscription box business in the year of 2020, and it just became quite popular. I was surprised. And it's because everybody's at home as well, and maybe they're bored, and they just got back to their crafts and, you know, the skills and all of that. And I just found it was trending. It was, you know, quite a great trend out there at the time. But let's talking about trends now, because we are here talking about how fashion is changing. We've spoken about sustainability, ethical fashion, the whole story, crafts and so forth. But Justin, now, I mean, you've worked within for various brands, so trends are always at the beginning. You're at the forefront of that, dispelling what is coming next. And recently, new trends have been evolving. We see things like social media influencers driving the direction of what is popular in fashion, through to high-level style collaborations like Pharrell, again at Louis Vuitton, as creative lead. So what major trends are you seeing, or how things are changing in the industry? How is it impacting your ability to forecast?
Do you know what? It's been quite interesting listening to what everyone's saying about, obviously, like the impact that the industry has. And I think one thing that sticks with me since COVID happened, we try not to talk about it because it's like, all right, everybody's a bit bored of. But to the early point, the need for information and the speed that people, consumers, consume product in, the accessibility of intel is there's too much. There's too much information out there. And I think what that's naturally done is just drive this hunger, this desperation for wanting more information, more intel. Okay, this is past, this has moved on, what's the next thing? And I think I've been, I guess, fortunate enough to work at a smaller agency and now obviously working at a much more global corporate level, is to understand how that information is digested by a brand, by a consumer, on social media, physically in the store space as well. So there's so many, I think, critical points along the process that have been impacted by this need for speed, production. There's a panic mode. The buyers are panicking, the designers are panicking, the customers are panicking. And I think, we explored this idea of wanting to slow down and sort of move away from this overconsumption, but actually we continue just to feed, that need for having more. And I think what the problem is that, as soon as something comes in, something is it's already out. Social media, the accessibility to be able to just have, and we're all guilty of it, being on our phones, 24/7. What's this? Oh, let me just send that to my supplier. Let's see if he can, mock something up. And I think what has happened is that actually it's eventually going to become unsustainable in process perspective rather than from an ethical perspective, because we continue to chase that need. So, I've worked, I guess, with clients that are identified as faster fashion businesses. Their lead times might be, sort of 52 days in terms of this is when we get the information.
Any of those names.
I think, I don't know, maybe it's just recorded because I don't want to be held accountable.
We won't go
But
there.
like when you talk about having a concept and an idea, and then 52 days later it's online or in the store space, that's crazy. We had a conversation with a business who claimed to be able to land something in 22 days from having the conversation to that landing on the e-commerce platform.
Where was their production?
And how is that linking to what
Yeah.
I just said with the lead times?
So that's the way, I guess, that just continues. So it's not only the consumer, but where we're looking at information and the need of how forecasting has happened. I think traditionally, Jax, when we were designers 10, 20 years ago, we'd be working 2 years ahead and we'd be going like, what's the color going to be in 2 years? And we'd go, this is and what's the fabric's going to be? And that process of going to PV and seeing the mills and understanding what innovation and technology is.
That's Premiere Vision or
sorry.
Vision.
It's like, it's slowly eroding because actually with impacts of COVID and, okay, tomorrow your factory might be shut because somebody's, been taken ill and then production gets put on hold. It's actually having the reverse effect on the decision making within the business because they're holding on to their cards a lot closer to season launch because actually they want to go, is that going to work?
Yeah.
What are the impacts it's going to have? Can I see what's happening globally to be able to influence what's happening in decision making internally within the business? So it's like...
Let me just jump in there then, because I love LinkedIn. and I am a LinkedIn creator, just saying. Yes, other creators here. Just no, seriously, I was on LinkedIn and there was an article around fashion weeks, because it is fashion month, fashion season, whatever. And just the fact of, some brands just doing one annual fashion show rather than the twice yearly shows and, all these other ranges in between. So it was starting up a bit of a debate. I mean, is that, because that's going to impact your trend forecasting. Is it something that you're seeing happening even within trends, that it's not like spring, summer, autumn, winter, and resort lines and cruise lines and all these other lines, and this drop and that drop? Are you seeing just like a one theme, like 2023 is punk rock for the whole year? I don't know. Are you seeing things like that happening?
I mean, we live for those touch points in the year to be able to see what
Are they
collections
relevant?
are coming out. Well, that's the worst question is like, what am I going to buy next summer? What's the next colour? You always hear those sort of questions, and then someone goes, "What is trend?"
Yeah.
And then you go, "Oh, we could be here for hours." But I suppose it's trying to understand the balance between, I guess, seasonality, gender. These are some of the bigger topics that could happen. So seasonality, for example, the shift in what we're all experiencing, in terms of, actually it'll be snowing in August, or something like, has a big impact on the buy, because you go, actually I wanted to plan my jacket buy or my knitwear buy, and it's still super hot September, October, November. So there's an impact from a brand perspective, but actually when you look at the execution of catwalk shows, they're very different from how they once were. They were very specific to the city, whether it was men's or women's. What does the model look like? What does the product look like? So there is a blur as we start to see, and it comes down, if you trickle down all the way from that catwalk level to a commercial level, that cost of living, that impact on the consumer spend has changed so much that actually you want to buy something with added value that's going to last you a bit longer, so it can transition between seasons. Is there a modular component to it that I can dress it up or down across occasions?
So we have to, as human beings, change. Well, I'm going to let Ursula
I
jump
would
in
like to
before
say
I say
something
it.
about size, because we're talking about designers, and I know what you're saying. I myself was a designer many, many, many years ago. And I think that people use language in a way that it's a little bit too generic. I mean, for a young creative designers, 22 days is brilliant to get something out to their customers. It's exactly what they need. It's spontaneous, it's there, it reduces their waste because they're using what's on their floor. But we describe those people artisans, and therefore we don't consider them. So we have an industry that has polarized. Massive, huge, gigantic, and tiny, micro, unseen. And we need to meet in the middle, because the guys, the big ones, are screwing up the industry with rhythms 100%. That are unworkable for them. But those same rhythms might be absolutely brilliant for their polar opposite, for a tiny local designer group really working successfully. So it feels to me that we need to look at the fashion industry and actually start being accurate when we name those roles and those positions. And we actually need to start making space, because we have post-pandemic, surely we should step up with this evolution. Time for the dinosaurs to go and the mammals to come in. We've seen what the gigantification does. Surely we should celebrate precisely the diversity that makes it possible for someone to actually thrive within those 22 days, and for those who can't.
And that's the blur. That is the blur of the industry that Justin was speaking about. I mean, Patrick, when we connected, we were speaking about just the use of fashion tech. I mean, that's something that's also been evolving. I remember when I first saw 3D fashion at a trade show many years ago, and it was like, I thought, well, this is kind of cool, but I didn't think it was going to just take over the way they has. That, was talking to Justin previously and saying, do we need to learn Clothes 3? Do we need to learn some of these tools? And like, I don't know. But you've done shows using, technology, fashion technology. Could you tell us a little bit about that and how you're seeing just the industry change with like digital fashion and all these other VR, AIs and all these terms now?
Yeah, so during the beginning of COVID, it was clear that my physical fashion show wouldn't be able to take place, so we switched it and created a digital one, which felt like a safe way to create a collection because everybody working on it was at home. But it was really interesting because it meant that a little bit earlier, I suppose, than maybe we would have done before, we were seeing how to create digital-only garments, right? These are garments that are created only within a computer and live within a computer, so they have no physical side to them at all. And I think the reality is that there's a generation or two below me that spend time inside worlds and want clothes for those worlds and are already dressing themselves in their games. You know, five-year-olds and 7-year-olds are choosing clothes to wear on their version of themselves in the game that they play with their friends online, or 18-year-olds are choosing armor to wear in their games that they play with their friends online, and that won't change as those generations grow up. And so maybe it's not necessarily in the mainstream of the people that are controlling the purses right now, but I think it is going to start to come through kind of fairly quick, or it already is coming through. It's just not necessarily a normal fashion customer, and that can be incredibly exciting. We did like a carbon calculator in our digital show, and actually it was very high. And so sustainability-wise, it's something to consider, that just because it doesn't have a physical thing doesn't mean that it doesn't have an impact. Energy uses, I mean, digital fashion uses energy, and so you have to bear that in mind. And what was interesting, actually, that we found out is the bigger the digital garment, the more energy it uses, which I don't know why, I just hadn't thought about that before.
Really?
So almost you kind of have to think of it with the same parameters of sustainability in the physical world, because, you know, if you make a ginormous cape, it's going to use 4 times as much energy because it used 4 times as much fabric, even though the fabric isn't real. Wow. So very fascinating, but it can also be a great way to sample or to see things in different colors and different fabrics without making a physical product, and that can be...
Make quicker decisions, I guess,
exactly,
for the brands that will
yeah,
still
and
doing that.
like for me, for example, my design process is a lot about kind of photoshopping things or mocking things up or digitally altering the image so I can see how it would look physically before we actually make it. And so we only have to make one sample because I've actually seen the sample on the computer in all the fabrics and in all the colors. But with Chloe, you can do that. And that's actually why this program was created. It was created to speed up the sampling process and eliminate waste from that. And so instead of a brand producing 20 of the same dress, so the designer can choose one for their fashion show, the idea was that they could see them all on the screen before and then just choose one. But outside of that, you know, like these programs still have the kind of like things that the real world have, like gravity. And if you think in the digital world, that doesn't have to apply. So the possibilities are kind of endless and very exciting. And I think as we all come to grips with this idea of being in this kind of future version of the internet, which is less kind of just consuming and more kind of engaging and being kind of within it, I think we'll all start to kind of engage more with the idea of the fact that we will have a wardrobe there and a wardrobe here.
It's such a difficult one in some ways, because it is exciting. You know, I said to my husband I wanted a VR headset. You know, I wanted to get into those worlds because it just looks so cool. And the peer pressure, I guess. I haven't got it yet, and Christmas is way gone. But there you go. But you know, and being also a home sewer, fashion designer, I make clothes, especially for weddings and events like that for myself. And you do as well, Priscilla. And just a feeling of, will our crafts die with this? Is there that fear for you? Do you think the movement that I was talking about with the crafts industry during 2020, when everybody's at home and probably bored, that was just a fad? What's your take on this in regards to what you're doing compared to what Patrick is speaking about? Can they work together, or are they always going to be in battle with one another?
I think they can work together, and I also think it would never go away. It's always been around. My mom had a sewing machine. I have one now. If my daughter wants one, by all means, I'll get her a sewing machine. Because I think it's a skill that not only are you able to create something for yourself, you can mend stuff around the house. It's something that you would always need at some point in your life, no matter how big or how small that garment is. I don't think people, like we were at home, you didn't have to travel into work. So you had your mornings off, your evenings off. We had a lot of time on our hands. We were curious, we were anxious, we were bored. People were making banana bread, people were making coffee, people were crocheting. I think people just got curious about different ways that they could spend their time. And I did see like a spike in my viewership on YouTube and how many people were like, yeah, so I think people just had time to spare, and sewing was one way that they decided to spend that time. So they kind of like got on the channel, watched videos, learned how to do things for themselves. But there are also people who are maybe in between sizes, and they go into a shop and they never find anything for themselves. If they know how to create...
That's my world.
Like, listen, like if they know how to create a piece for themselves, they're able to make something that is unique to their body, that fits right. And there's something so beautiful about making something for yourself and feeling so confident and beautiful in that piece, no matter how simple, even if it's a shift dress, a circle skirt, or just a t-shirt. That experience is absolutely priceless. There are also people who want to get into, starting your own businesses, and they can't go to fashion school. They have to go on YouTube.
Yep.
They have to go on
YouTube
Pinterest.
is school for
I've
many.
actually had people ask me, it's like, do I need to go to fashion school? And I'm like, I don't know.
You're right.
It depends on you. But if you're able to, sit down and learn on your own, practice, make mistakes, learn from them. I know people who have launched businesses by teaching themselves. So I don't think home sewing will go away. It'll be around for a while. A good while.
Yeah, I hope and pray so too. But Justin, just still on that topic, I mean, as a designer with the fashion tech, and probably coming from were you a sewer as well? Did you start off sewing or tailoring? Are you seeing that within trends, the whole movement in your industry to 3D fashion, to the way that you're presenting things has to be done using these new tools? Is that happening from an industry perspective?
Yeah, I think there's quite a few aspects. I think the 3D, when it first came out, I remember we had a conversation and it blew my mind. And I was like, Jackie, we could have been, if this was around when we were designing like CADs and doing everything by hand, it would have changed. It made life so much more efficient. I was fortunate enough to work with the business, and this was my first proper experience and exposure to sort of 3D design, and they were working with one of the big sports brands, and 3D design was taken to the level where you could create a product, put it up on a billboard, or put it up on social media, and gauge the reaction from the consumer, the likes, comments, and then go, is that going to that's going to dictate whether I make that shoe or not. It looked like the real thing, and I was just like, how amazing to be able to have that agility and to be able to react to the consumer who's ultimately buying the product. So I think for me, it's learning these new skills now. I feel like the dinosaur. When I see how hungry, I guess, like younger creatives are. My daughter, she's 5. In their primary school, in the later years, they're teaching them coding already. So I just think it's
wow.
Mine is 6.
It's just I think a shift between generations where we probably curse the metaverse and every aspect, and maybe there's components to it that we don't really understand. I don't personally understand it all. I'm more about the physical side of things, but what one can't do is ignore the importance and the impact that it's going to have, because actually eventually I'm not going to be here, and those younger generations that you spoke about, that's going to be the customer. So for businesses and brands, it's important to understand, I think, and be aware of what's happening. Don't react specifically to these big trends and go, right, well, I want to do an NFT because everybody's doing an NFT, or I want to do a digital collection because, you know, everybody else. What's important to you? Remember what's happened to the customer is super important. But I think for me, the 3D aspect of design is super interesting, and from the sustainable side, ethical side of things, you know, another sportswear brand within this business, when I saw the numbers in terms of like, this is how many sample shoes they were making a year to the amount that they cut back to, was like astronomical. From a financial side of things, they were saving themselves millions and millions of dollars a year, and speeding up that. Again, it comes back to speed. They were speeding up the process, the efficiencies, the decision making, all of that. When you strip it back, comes back to the process at the beginning, at the start. That's the 3D side. I'm going to keep going. If I wrap it, just pull me back in.
I'll
but
pull you back.
The other side of, I guess, tech, you know, you think of like ChatGPT's like the exciting topic of the moment. You know, obviously, you know,
Yep.
people aren't talking about the metaverse as much, and they're talking about ChatGPT and what's the impact that that's going to have on businesses. I've got one more point after this as well. And it's quite interesting because I think where we've been on a journey with like brands and customers, it's always been about actually that relationship and the dialogue between the brand. Actually, how do you create a conversation that feels honest and transparent? Actually, we want to diverge to this process where actually it's all, you know, AI driven, and, you know, the conversations don't feel real anymore. So I'm interested to see where that side of things go from a technical aspect in a conversation. And then my last bit about tech, I just wanted to just touch on is like the data side of things. And I think what's been quite interesting from, I guess, like data and information is how brands and businesses want that to quantify their decision making even further. So it's all full and well saying, all right, it's going to be pink, it's going to be yellow, or it's going to be, you know, a chiffon dress or anything like that. But where you dig deeper down and peel back the layers, the amount of information and data that's driven that, okay, we can scan the internet and find out, you know, specific brands are doing this, specific shows, and then you quantify that information and go, actually, there's X% doing this, or there's 20%, there's a dip in this. It is mind-blowing.
So it's, again, the blur, because you can see the development. You can see how it can positively impact the industry with tech and so forth. But then it's like, I'm still on the fence. I'm still on the fence with all of it. Progress is great, but sometimes progress isn't always the way. And I'm sure many of you are going to probably slam me down because I just said that. But
I think it's like,
go for it.
For me, it's like anything, right? It's like a tool, and it's how you use it that depicts what
True.
happens with it. So just like anything can have great and awful consequences, this is exactly the same. And it can be used to mass produce and mint 1 million of something that you will then sell 1 million of, or you could be responsible about it and mint 100 of them and sell them and know where it's being made and all of that. So for me, I think it's a tool, and it's like how you use it that depends on the impact it has.
But I like how you said, you know, when you're doing the digital fashion and, you know, you monitored your carbon and, you know, you was using the tool, but you was looking at it in the way of how its impact, its environmental impact as well. So again, it's like everything, like you said, it's how you use it. Like, people will say a particular weapon might be dangerous, but it's not the weapon. That's just an innate object. It's how the person behind it and how they use it. So I get that. I think that's a really, really great way of seeing things. I want to bring us back just down to the basics before we kind of get ready to open up for questions. So get your questions ready. Team, get the mics ready for those who will be asking questions in the audience and those online as well. So the basics, going back to the basics of having a brand, Laura, and having a sustainable, I know I'm going to get ethical, circular, sustainable brand, and within the retail market, and because you entered this market from a different industry. So for those who may be here tonight who are startups, who are looking at, you know, those here who have brands or had brands and want to still get into fashion today, and navigate this now online retail industry and still be sustainable, ethical, and all the above? How can they do that?
I think you really start from creating a valuable product. Do people need what I'm actually doing?
Exactly.
It's not about trends. It's not about, if I have to be honest, I've spent like all my life in fashion, in different facets of fashion, but like in fashion. And you've seen the bad, the ugly, the good, all of it. But I do feel like as someone that creates a physical product, for me, the most important thing is to be able to answer the question, does someone actually need that? Does what I'm making is going to stay with this person so he can use it for like, and for me, I have the answer. I think that's like where you start. The second thing for me, and I believe that should be like the base for everyone who creates any kind of physical product right now, is am I creating something that's impacting the environment, but also like before the environment, people? Because we make clothes because people need them. So I kind of started to despise the narrative where we talk about sustainability only from environmental point of view, because there is, a huge amount of people, even when I was listening to both of you, and it's fascinating, everything you both said is fascinating, but, again, coming from a nation of tailors, seeing and learning and these are amazing skills which have been lost in places like England, in places in the West predominantly. What's happening with those people? I have this question, and for me, this is like the basic stuff, okay? If I'm not harming the environment, am I actually supporting those people that make those garments? So for me, it starts with people, kind of, but
Absolutely.
considering both of them. And I feel like we sort of neglect a little bit that, especially in the West. I don't want to sound critical, but I want to really highlight that because we very often talk about fibers. Me too. I talk about fibers a lot. People ask about, but is it organic cotton? Is it? And my usual answer is, you know what? It doesn't matter. If someone is being hurt or exploited or completely dehumanized so they can make your organic cotton shirt, how is that sustainable or ethical or responsible in any way? So I feel like that's also the dilemma with the technical, with everything that tech can bring into the table.
It may also
Blockchain,
just,
transparency, all of that.
it may just take those jobs as well. I mean,
Yeah.
that's kind of,
So there
there'll be
must
no
be a
need for the
transition,
people.
but what's the transition,
Absolutely.
So I feel like a lot of fashion people that want to go into that business needs to start with those questions.
With that in mind, Ursula, because your book, Loved Clothes Last, it represents this industry that Laura's speaking about from the aspect of, I guess, circular fashion in some ways. What's the biggest message that book is sharing around that topic that you
Repairs.
wanted it to share? No problem, go for it.
Repairs and reparations. I mean, there are some people that take the view, myself included until quite recently, that this industry is broken. I actually no longer believe it is broken. I believe it very deliberately designed itself to function like this, therefore to function for those who are at the top and to exploit those who are at the bottom. So for me, my love for clothes prevent me from, it's a love gesture, wearing clothes for me. For many, it's necessity. But if there is something that the book I hope to convey is that we won't change things unless we really deeply, intimately know why we need to change them. So there's a little bit of that why. And then I try to hook your impetus, because no one's going to change because someone told them so, or because the world's full of organic cotton. Someone's going to change because they feel that they can be a part of that change. So I hope to hook that impetus, and I hope to also explain that any gesture that you do from your wardrobe onwards is exactly how trends are made. Trends are made of somebody doing something right or good or brilliant, and other people following them along the journey. So you wake up that morning, you wear that shirt, you be that trend, you answer the questions that you're asked, you get to the square in your village, and other people will be doing what you're doing with that same enthusiasm. That's what I hope to convey in the book.
Amazing, amazing. I love that. I love that, absolutely love that. I'm going to open up for questions. So just as the team is getting ready with the mics, and one of the things that I appreciate about that is, you know, within my own business, I look at African fashion. So what I'm wearing at the moment is made in Ghana, is kente. It's been hand woven. And within these kind of textiles, that is handmade, and the messages within the fabric, within the design, within the weave, you know, it's ancient, it's storytelling, which I think within all that, as creators, we all want to tell stories within the art that we create. It just happens to be on the body, items that we wear on the body. But I think ultimately that is what it is. It's just this internal need to share a story, but then there's another internal need to do things better and better and better. So with that in mind, just checking if there's any questions from our friends online. Just going to have about 15 minutes for questions, and then we'll go into our interview with, or fireside chat with our guest, Patrick Grant. But any, nothing from online. So online you are watching and you're enjoying. Hopefully that's a good thing. You've got nothing to say. Perfect. So it means oh wow, those in the audience here. Sorry?
We are talking too much then.
No, they must be enjoying it. If there is any questions come through, please do share those online. But if you just look behind you, you can see, you know, we are packed out today, which shows that there's a lot of people who are interested in the changing face of fashion and probably how you can get involved in it. So I'd like you to just raise your hands. We've got like about 15 minutes. Make your questions precise. Say your name before you say the questions, and the mic will be going around. So somebody at the back there, the team. Okay, and we've got two in the middle here. Somebody keep an eye on three in the middle. Okay. And say your name, the question, and who it's for, unless it's for all.
Okay. Hello. Thank you so much for everyone actually on the panel for sharing, you know, your journey and what you're doing. My name is Susanna, and I actually work in the fashion industry as well. And my main question is that we see a lot of, I would say, greenwashing. And we see a lot of, you know, brands making products that are sustainable and also making products that isn't sustainable. And I work in the industry because I know that, you know, people want to make the products sustainable, but the cost of doing, you know, the fabrics and the cost of, you know, the construction of the garment does outweigh the cost of doing it, you know, high quality and sustainable fabrics. Do you think that with all that's happening, and especially with the higher brands that are doing it, do you think they can ever reach that goal, especially the goals that they state quite publicly that they're going to be achieving while they're still producing the other materials?
Who is that for?
So that's for anyone on the panel, but particularly, you know, those who are, I think mostly for the forecasts.
Okay.
It's a hard one.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think on the greenwashing side, I think what I've seen, I think at a commercial level, retail level, is that transparency and the conversation is the most important part. I think we can see, like, look at H&M, look how quickly, you know, you do this work to improve the process, and it can get undone. Well, no, it's not undone, but you know, they've been called out. You know, actually it was a lie.
Rightfully so.
So I think it's about how do you create that conversation that says, you know, we're trying to do better. You know, we're not perfect, but actually this is the journey, and we're trying to do better, and this is how we're doing it. So it's like, stick with us. And I think it's really important just to understand that, you know, there's going to be one part of your customer base that you know, might not be interested in that. You know, they just want to be interested in the product itself. There's going to be a loyal customer that buys into the brand and the vision. And I think it's actually how do you balance, because I think, like I said, the earlier point is when you react to something and do something just for the sake of it, it's the wrong reason. You have to believe. You have to believe in what you're. Sounds terrible. Believe what you're trying to achieve, and drive that. So I think it's. I don't know. If you wanted to be like brutally honest, I don't think it will ever be 100%. It can't be 100% sustainable.
Can I
Think
say
about that.
something?
Somebody like to jump on that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really want.
That is a good question.
It's a really good question, and I very often get this question because we obviously are a sustainable, ethical, responsible brand, whatever you want, call it. I ask a question back. Why is no one asking why it's so cheap? Why is no one actually looking at how much
Exactly.
Zara or H&M were costing 20 years ago and not asking how is it possible? How is it possible that everything went up? Services, products, every single thing. The glasses we are drinking from went up. How is it possible that clothes went down? We all know that cotton went up, and you know these are common things. You don't have to work in this industry to actually know that. How is it possible that it's so cheap and they are getting it cheaper and cheaper and cheaper? So I think that's a good question to have at all times, because the answer is exploitation of labor. What Patrick pays for cotton and I pay for cotton and H&M pay for cotton, it doesn't has that much of a difference, you know? Obviously they will pay less, but it's not that big of a difference. Where they really get the trick done is exploiting people, which you don't see.
And we've helped them.
And we help them.
I mean, we've
So-
spent 20 years saying that fast fashion is so bloody cheap that we might as well just throw it in the bin. I mean, hello, whose work have we been doing? Fast fashion is simply made, meaning it's simple to repair. If we want to slow down the system, needles in hand. And if you don't know how to repair, frankly, I'm awful at it. I'm really exact. I really love things that are wonderfully made. So I would rather pay somebody a very decent amount of money for them to repair my clothes. But actually what I want to see is repair stations in every single fast fashion store, on every single high street, and in airports, because we do a lot of waiting in airports, and in station, because we do a lot of waiting in station. But the point is that it's this cheap thing that's the problem. Nothing's cheap if you love it.
Absolutely.
You keep it, you make
look
it,
after
you
it,
carry
exactly.
on, you look after it. That surely in itself, since you imagine an army of 16-year-olds, like the ones I see since I've joined TikTok, and I show them my crocheted jumper, which is full
The
of
TikTok
holes.
is great, by the way.
We are
It
all
is
doing
great.
TikTok.
No, yeah, but it's
And
because
Lord.
there's a response. Can you imagine a whole bunch of these guys going to Boohoo, Pretty Little Things, and saying, sorry, my skirt has broken, but guess what? I don't want to buy a new one because this is my skirt. What we've done to younger generations is that we've made them so distrust their clothes that they don't love them and they throw them. They're clever, they sell them away. But we've killed that love, that power. And that is part of the problem. It's that word cheap, looking for cheaper and cheaper and cheaper.
Jack,
Great
sorry.
point.
Jackie, just on that, I think that the other issue, I guess, when you think about how big the industry is, you
Yeah.
know, and you know, we're not comparing, I guess, like smaller personal brands.
No, no.
You know, those corporations, it's all about margin.
Yeah.
You know,
It
it's all
is.
about,
It
at the
is.
end of the day, it's like how much money can we, how much profit can we make? How cheap can I negotiate my price point?
But it's about
for
value
fabric?
again, you know.
How many units can I buy? How can I get my 60, 70,
It's
80%
true,
margin?
because-
Like that's
yeah,
that's
that's-
all they care about.
Yeah.
No,
It was like,
And margins
yeah, that, you
there,
know,
and
there's
nothing's
bonuses,
reinvested
you know,
into the supply chain's well-being.
bonuses, you know, targets,
Apart from
KPIs, all of that stuff.
All of
that's
those
what's-
things.
That's what's driving the decision making within the business. It doesn't matter whether, you know, no, it does matter. Sorry, that's wrong. We want to make the change, but it's difficult. You can't disrupt you know, the process.
But maybe it needs disrupting. Maybe, and that's what everybody here is kind of doing in their own ways. Is disrupting. I mean, the KPIs and everything. It is a major part of it. I remember, you know, I used to work at CNA, and within my ethical fashion masters, I looked at the cotton industry, and exploring that. And I remember that CNA and H&M were the two biggest buyers of organic cotton, of cotton in general. And so they would buy years in advance, so then there'll be less for smaller brands to be able to consume because these giants would be buying up that industry. So then they could get it at the cheaper price to be able to sell cheaper. So it's a crazy industry. And I just want to add on about the used clothes. For those who are sewers in the house, like us here, repairing, don't just ask your sewing friend to repair. Because it is a bit of a, you know, that question, could you hem my trousers? We don't always like that. But let me ask for the next question. There was a couple in the middle here. There were three here. If you keep your hands raised so we can see those in the middle that I saw. Noel?
Suddenly loads of questions.
Thank you. So my name is Dimitrios Biskias. My question has to do with, today we talked about the power of image and social media in a digital world. And my question is about wearing clothes with logos. Does it promote inclusivity by signaling the sustainable practices of the brands at hand? Or in your opinion, in a digital world, it puts barriers regarding the personas communicating digitally and physically? And my question is to everyone in the panel, especially those who talked about sustainability with regards to the people's dimension. Thank you.
So the question is about the logos and inclusive. Does it show that you're aligned with that brand? Is that what you're saying?
Where signaling the brand by wearing the logo itself explicitly on ourselves promotes inclusivity, or on the other hand, exclusivity.
Okay, anybody? We'll just have like one response so we can get some more questions. Who wants to answer that?
I think they can be incredibly powerful if the brand really stands for something. Obviously, it represents something. That's why we like wearing them, right? Like, I don't know, like Vivienne Westwood or whatever.
Westwood.
Nike.
I've actually had this for about 20 years. I was an intern of Vivienne Westwood.
Yeah, and
so
it
I've had it
means
for
something.
20 years. It just about fits still. Just about.
I guess it really depends on what, though.
Yeah,
You know, like,
I mean, you'd hope with Vivienne that would kind of
yeah.
bring up some kind of like climate responsibility, I suppose. Yeah, I mean, they can be. I think visuals are very powerful, right? That's the industry I'm in. So.
It's storytelling, isn't it?
Yeah,
It
yeah.
depends
But what
how
do you mean about, what do you mean inclusivity or exclusivity? Like, basically, are you talking about luxury fashion and logos? I wasn't clear on that.
I think it's like, does the logo represent, if it represents something to do with the...
Are you aligned with
How
that
do
then?
you-
So me wearing Vivienne Westwood doesn't mean that I'm aligned with everything that she stands for.
Okay.
You know, I guess. And yeah, I mean, it's an interesting question, very interesting question. And I think it's a on the fence one again, right? I think we're all on the
There's a
fence.
lot of exclusivity in logos,
Yeah.
right? As much as
'Cause some-
inclusivity.
I mean, people do buy brands because it represents, you know, yeah, maybe a lifestyle that they want or they aspire to, or because it makes them look like they have more money if they buy, you know, the Louis Vuittons or whatever the brand may be. And maybe that's how they want to present themselves to the world. Whereas, you know, I mean, you wear your own brand. This is what you've made. So what does that say? I mean, you know, what are you saying by wearing your own brand?
I think it shares my journey from someone who started from not knowing how to sew a straight seam to playing with volume, shape, and print. I also like to tell the story about where I'm from. I'm from Ughelli Delta State in South Nigeria, and there is so much culture, so much heritage, and I try to do that with my collections. And if people ask me, well, what are you wearing? I'm always quick to tell them what I'm wearing, where I'm from, because there's so much beauty out there that some people might never get to see, and I'm proud to share with whoever is ready to listen.
There you go. So storytelling again, as you were saying, right, Justin? So any other questions? A couple more questions? I know we've got a lot. Go ahead. We'll have to make it really quick now so that we can. Yep. Oh, there is one online. Okay, so, okay. All right, Carla, how can you maintain sustainability and profitability while competing in an overcrowded market? I think we may have answered that one.
I would just
Or do you
like
want to step on that?
the word compete.
While competing in an overcrowded market, go ahead.
Compete, we're using the word wrong. So the actual etymology of the word compete is to competere. Now, com is always with from the Latin, and petere means to seek together. So actually to compete has nothing to do with rivalry. We have attached the concept of rivalry to the word competing. The word conspiring actually means to breathe together. So potentially the answer to the question is actually in the word competition itself. If we strive together for something rather than competing against each other, which ultimately at the end of the day is a way of killing resources. Because if you're killing everybody else just in order to make yourself be the first, then you've killed the competition. You've killed all of the diversity. On the other hand, you run that race holding hands. Some of them might be a little bit faster, others slower. But maybe you solve the problem.
Competing, that's a good point. We was asked, okay, I'm going to kind of wrap up a couple of these real quickly because just to make sure that those online watching will also be able to join in with the conversation we're going to have with Patrick that we're going to call up in a few minutes. Just asking about educating the younger generation who need affordable fashion, this person says, and what skills should we be teaching the fashion students?
So I need to say one quickly here, because we're educating fashion designers. We need to educate and make superstars of pattern cutters, of seamstresses, of merchandisers, of printers, of technicians. Then we will have balanced teams.
It's very true.
You were saying that you were
I agree with that as well.
biologist to begin with.
Microbiologist.
Microbiologist.
Yeah.
Every single fashion team of the future is going to need a microbiologist.
I
It's going
agree.
to need a chemist. It's going to need diversity, and not is again the fashion industry emulates top up designer. God, no. What about everybody else? That's actually the clogs in the machine are the ones we need to superstar now.
There you go. Another one from the audience? We're going to have another Q&A at the end as well, so if you don't get to ask a question, we'll get it at the end as well. Noelle,
Hi,
if you pick the person.
it's working? Yes. Hi, may I ask you please, me, I'm a stylist and I did haute couture in Paris. What I would like to ask is why in England there is no the tradition of small houses with well-made clothes. If you go in Paris, you don't need to buy Yves Saint Laurent, Dior. You can find small designers, not necessarily that it is something totally new. You know, I believe that fashion, we need to follow our times, but you need to look better in your clothes than when you are naked. Usually, I see people better naked than actually wearing their clothes. And I found all of that fast food, cheap fashion that make the people ugly. But there is no trained people that they know even to treat well the fabric, choose the fabric, know what kind of design you will do with that fabric, respect the human body and make
Sorry,
a
could
woman...
you, what's the main question?
Why
No,
there is no trained people in England? If tomorrow, for example,
trained,
me, I
okay.
decide to make my company,
That's not a
I would like quality.
That's not a sole problem of England, though.
Sorry?
I mean, that's not a problem of just England. That's the major problem in pretty much all the West, including Italy, which is a very prominent location for garment making.
Italy, they don't
It's
make
a
nice
huge
clothes?
problem. We don't have technical teams all over, and this is not an opinion, it's a fact. They're shrinking. So what you're basically saying here is that we have a specific problem in England. But in general, it's not a specific to England problem.
But
it's
historically,
a specific.
fast fashion starts in England.
Yeah,
In
true,
England,
true,
it
but
is huge. If you compare with Italy, I'm
Okay.
Greek myself, and in Greece, not the quality of France, but France and Italy, they do, how to say, middle design clothes, really, really very good quality. You don't need to be Dior. The people, I think, here, they buy the brands because they can't find a good quality product from a younger designer.
Okay.
I just wanted to say that you see what you put your money into, whether that's fashion, whether that is art. Like, where you put your money into, you might not see the impact today, but 10 years from now, that choice you've made would come back one way or the other. So I think it's that way. I didn't grow up here, so I really don't know. But like in Nigeria, like we don't have like, you know, what she mentioned. And that's because we want to get things from the West. We want to be cool. But I think that by making that choice, we're also killing away that identity slowly and gradually. So, yeah.
Wow, we could keep talking. I can see there's so many questions, but I really want to bring up our guest speaker. There will be more time for questions afterwards, I promise you that. So I'm going to ask the amazing guests, Priscilla, Ursula, Laura, Patrick M, and Justin, to please take your seats. And thank you so far. Please give them a round of applause. Thank you so much.